So welcome everyone to our annual Bridges Trustee Appreciation event, where we thank and honor library board members for their service. I'm Laurie Freund, Coordinator of Library Development for the Bridges Library System. Because of the ongoing pandemic, we are offering you a virtual experience this year, so you can enjoy this program from the comfort of your home. Before I introduce our first speaker, I would like to acknowledge a few people from the Bridges office who have worked on this event. Thanks to Jill Fuller, who helped to make the email messages to all of you go out smoothly with wonderful graphics. Thanks also to Melanie Mercier, who is working with me behind the scenes this evening. And of course, thanks to our Bridges Library System Director, Karol Kennedy, who provided ideas and support so we could create an enjoyable and meaningful program. So now that everyone has settled in, we have a few questions for you that you can answer. When you see the question be posted, as it gets posted, go ahead and select your answer and click on the submit button. Okay, are you ready? Here we go with the first question. Which Halloween movie is your favorite? You can select. We have Beetlejuice, Dracula, Death Becomes Her, Friday the 13th, Ghostbusters, Hocus Pocus, and The Witches of Eastwick. Just wait a little bit longer for everybody to participate. A few more. Okay, we'll end that one. And I'll share the results here. So the winner is Ghostbusters. And well, that's the one I would have guessed. Okay, so now we have another one. Let's see. And another one is, hang on, and I'm bringing up the first one. So let me see if I can bring up the next one. Yeah. Nope, it's not working tonight. So hang on. And what I'll do is I'll read it off and you can actually answer in chat. So what is the best part of being a library or a library system trustee? So is it all the public adoration, the pay, snacks at board meetings, or the budget season? And you can type it in chat. We got public adoration. Okay. Oh, the pay. Of course, it has to be the budget. Yep, public adoration, budget. Okay.
Public adoration wins.
Yes, looks like it. Okay. Well, that's great. Thanks to all who responded to those questions. And now our Bridges Board President, Linda Ager, has a few words of welcome for us.
Oh, Linda's muted.
Linda, you're muted.
Okay, can you hear me now?
You can.
Okay. Hi, everyone. On behalf of the Bridges Library System Board of Trustees, I would like to welcome you to our second annual virtual trustee appreciation event. We're here to honor you as trustees for the time, dedication, and support you give to your libraries. Thank you for serving your libraries and for serving your communities. I want to also say thank you to staff from all 24 libraries in the system, as well as to Bridges system staff for your contributions to this strong library system. In preparing for tonight, I looked at the remarks that I gave last year, and I had a deja vu moment. Much of what I said about the pandemic still applies. At last year's event, it didn't even occur to me that we could be doing this virtually again this year. I said second annual virtual event because anytime the event is held more than 1 year, it can be called annual. I hope we don't have to have a third annual virtual event, but you never know, and we actually could choose to do this sometime. After all, it's only because of the virtual capability that we have here with us tonight a special speaker I'm really looking forward to hear, and that's John Chrastka of EveryLibrary. That ability to go virtual is one of the things that has kept us afloat in the past year. The staff have even turned going virtual into something positive. For example, hybrid meetings can be more accessible to the public and more flexible for trustees and staff than our in-person only meetings. Some libraries have collaborated to bring in big name presenters virtually. Other libraries have recorded programs so more people can watch them later, as this one is going to be recorded. Of course, going virtual has come with some growing pains. You've seen some tonight with the polling questions, and there I was muted and didn't know it. And you'd think a year later that maybe I would have upgraded my background and my technology, but I haven't. You know, some of those difficulties come with the new equipment. We've had meetings that have started late because of technology problems. We've had the muting, we've had feedback noise, we've had passwords that didn't work. Some of us, me included, could put together our own blooper reel about virtual board meetings. Once I lost my internet for about 10 minutes in the middle of a committee meeting. I was a secretary, and so I was worried that I was going to miss motion or some other action. That was the first time I ever hoped for a long-winded discussion about a county library funding formula. Another time I was leading a meeting and had to cough uncontrollably. I couldn't talk, so I just shut off my mic and my camera abruptly. It was awkward to come back to the meeting and explain my rushed departure. One day, I didn't show up on time to call a Bridges meeting to order. I was outside flipping on internet switch up and down, hoping the white light would come back on. That was a humbling lesson in not being able to control everything. I have not yet had an embarrassing camera moment, although I do live in fear that my camera will tilt and show that I care a lot more about books and papers than I care about having clear surfaces. But in spite of the bloopers and the learning curve, the ability to be virtual has in many cases rescued us this past year. Libraries have turned it into something good. Being virtual is only one of the many challenges this year. It has been hard for boards and for staff. So for some people here, it's been very difficult personally as well. It has required trustees to be adaptable and flexible. Thank you all for hanging in there. It's important work that you're doing, making sure communities have information on jobs, education, healthcare, finances, well-being, life skills, leisure, and so much more. Ensuring access to Wi-Fi, memory cafes, and makerspaces. Providing resources for entertainment, for connection, for community, and for so much more. As trustees, what you do matters. Thank you so much for serving on your library boards. I hope that the coming year will be smoother. I do know that no matter what, trustees and staff at both the system and library levels will adapt to whatever happens and find the good in it. As I said last year, stay healthy, stay hopeful. I wish all of you the best until we come together again in 2022 to honor trustees, whether that's in person or virtually. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce to you a person who helps keep the Bridges Library System headed in the right direction, no matter what. Here's Karol Kennedy, the Director of Bridges.
Thank you, Linda. And Linda and I took a page out of the same book. We, in looking back, in preparing for tonight, I too looked back at my message from last year and thought a lot about what the past year has been like, where we've been, how far we've come, how far we still have to go. And in some ways, every year is a little bit like that, right? I mean, we have the highs and the lows, the joys and the challenges. But boy, the last couple of years have been doozies. Despite all that, our libraries are taking on significant challenges and doing great things for individuals and the communities that they serve. Many library buildings have been or are in the process of being expanded or renovated, and improvements are being made to outdoor spaces. Several libraries successfully work through director transitions. Some libraries have gone fine-free. Library boards and staff have navigated challenges to library materials, and libraries across the system are implementing RFID technology. Our new Cafe Libraries app was released this year to rave reviews, and our library memory project has extended to 21 libraries in 4 counties. And just this week, we started training for the library memory project partnership with StoryCorps, which is super exciting. We've seen expansion of the Library of Things and lots more collaborative virtual program going on with libraries. We added Help Now to respond to the needs of students and job seekers. Community-wide reading projects inspired reading and connection. Several library staff participated in compassion resilience training, and then they are now training others in our system. And both our counties were involved in updating their county library service plans. And Jefferson County successfully worked with the county to include reimbursement to libraries for circulation of electronic materials, which is very exciting for our libraries. And Waukesha County is working on that as well. So that may be a possibility in Waukesha as well. And of course, COVID continued to impact our lives, resulting in service changes and often difficult decisions to make. To mask or not to mask, that is the question. Much time was devoted to trying to do the right thing for our staff, for our patrons, and to meet the expectations of the community. What do we do about programming? Is outdoor programming best? Should children gather for programs? Library staff and boards needed to tackle some big questions this year and continue to roll with the many COVID changes. But COVID has also inspired more story walks, curbside pickup, book bundles, at-home story kits and take and make projects, hybrid program and meetings, and so many more other innovative programs and services. It's kind of exhausting when you look back at it all, but you did it with your guidance and support of library staff, your desire to understand the needs of your community, your interest in providing great library service to all, and your significant contribution of time and energy to serve. You made a positive impact on your world. More than 200 individuals in Waukesha and Jefferson County serve on local library boards, the Bridges Library System Board, or the Jefferson County Library Service Board. And some of you serve on multiple boards. Our system has outstanding libraries because of all of you. And sometimes we get caught up in our daily lives and weighed down about another meeting or a difficult decision to make. But I just hope you don't lose sight of the awesome things that you're doing for all the individuals you serve and for the communities that you live in. And you may recall that some of the official words of the year that were selected for 2020 were lockdown, pandemic, quarantine, coronavirus. But recently I read an article that suggested that the word of the year for 2021 should be resilience. The Oxford Dictionary defines this as the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties, toughness, the ability of a substance or object to spring back into shape, elasticity. It's that quality that allows us to overcome challenges and obstacles and adversity instead of being defeated by them. It was suggested that resilience is what allows us to not just bounce back, but to bounce forward. And I continue to be in awe of the resiliency of our libraries and the work being done by library staff and boards to build strong libraries and build strong communities and make libraries welcoming for everyone. When we gather together next year, hopefully in person, I know we will look back at the year and be able to see not if libraries bounced forward, but just how far they've come. So thank you all so much for all that you do.
So thank you, Carol. I appreciate that. And so now we are going to have our guest speaker this evening, John Chrastka. Please note, if you have any questions for John, you can post those in the Q&A box. To find the Q&A box, you can hover your mouse over the bottom of your computer screen and you will find the Q&A icon from the Zoom bar features. If you're using a mobile device, you can find it on the upper right corner of your tablet or smartphone and find the Q&A box there. You can click on the Q&A box and then type and submit your question there, and John will be able to answer those questions at the end of his presentation. So tonight's guest speaker, John Chrastka, is the founder and executive director of EveryLibrary, the first nationwide political action committee for libraries, and the EveryLibrary Institute, a nonprofit focused on research and training to stabilize and extend library funding. He is a longtime library trustee, supporter, and advocate. Mr. Chrastka is a former partner in Associate Direct, a Chicago-based consultancy focused on supporting associations in membership recruitment, conference, and governance activities. He is a former president and member of the Board of Trustees for the Berwyn, Illinois Public Library, and former president of the RAILS, Reaching Across Illinois Libraries, multi-type library system. We are happy to have John join us from, wait, John, where are you this evening?
Well, that said Berwyn in Chicago, but tonight I'm in New Orleans.
Oh, lucky you. Thank goodness for technology. So we're ready, John, and you can take it away.
Lori, thank you so much. And Carol, what you had to say about resilience is very inspiring. Linda, I'm with you on tech. Folks, it's good to be here tonight with you from New Orleans. Though I'm in Berwyn, Illinois, our zip code there is 60402. If anybody's familiar with Berwyn, we're right by Oak Park, Riverside, Cicero, that near west part of the community. I was on the board for 8 years. I was board president for 6 years. Ran 2 strategic planning processes and hired 2 directors while I was there. It was a great time. I loved my service, and it was an important part of my biography, professionally and personally. It led me very much to do what I'm doing today, along with that time on the RAILS board, and prior to that, the Metropolitan Library System Board before it was consolidated into RAILS. I'm not a librarian. I don't come at this with a librarian's skill set. In fact, you don't want me doing a keynote on, say, I don't know, youth services or children's services. I'm probably the worst storytime proctor in the world. I was told one time you have to show the children the picture of the book. What I know is, as a citizen and as a civilian, somebody who's come to the library, not from the MLS side of it, but from, in my case, the infrastructure side of things. What kind of a community do we want to live in? How do we want to treat each other as neighbors? My wife is the big reader in the house. She's got the pile of books on the nightstand. It's going to fall over one night and kill us. But from my perspective, what we're here to do is essentially build, community. And it's not always the fluffy parts of it. Sometimes it's the hard infrastructure of it. I want to share with you what I know. Well, right now I'm in New Orleans. I'm working as a political, pro bono political consultant. All the work we do at EveryLibrary, for each and every library that we support, is all pro bono. We do it for free for 2 big reasons. One is that the library should not be using public funds to advance the outcome of an election. So we take that off the table. They can't hire us. We quit. And the work that we do is pro bono because we want to be able to focus on best practices for communities. I care very much what's on the yard sign for the campaign. I don't care who prints it. And being able to focus on that community, well, folks, the only library in the only community that I know very well is Berwyn, Illinois, my hometown. 60402 is the zip code. I know where all the bodies are buried. My grandfather came over from the old country. He raised my father there. I'm raising my sons. But in the same way that we're working here in New Orleans, it's with a great deal of respect. And it's a focus on what I'm going to share with you today, which is how do elected officials and the public listen when you start talking about, well, the biggest thing that makes Americans crazy is taxes. It's the thing that clouds everybody's ability to be to make good decisions when you're really talking about an institution, whether it's from the infrastructure perspective or the literacy and learning and reading perspective. How do we avoid getting bogged down in this big, messy conversation about taxes and really focus on who do we want to be, what kind of place we want to call home? So again, EveryLibrary, we're set up as a 501c4 organization. We are a different kind of organization than anything else in the library ecosystem. In a certain respect, we're the first new idea since Dewey died. Everything else is an association or an organization or a membership group. We are a political action committee. Very happy to be in that political space. We focus on one day a year, which is election day, or the day that the budget is decided by a city council, county government, town board. The work that we do, as I said, is all pro bono. And the work that we do is fundamentally driven by our mission, our vision, and our values. I can give you all kinds of stats, hundreds of elections, millions, or even depending on how you calculate it, billions of dollars raised for libraries on election days. But fundamentally, why are we doing this? It's because, well, we have a mission that is rooted in our identity as a political action committee. We're here to build voter support for libraries. Our vision for the future is what drives even our very name of ourselves, that any library funding issue anywhere should matter to every library everywhere. And that we have a set of values that we revisit all the time. How do we want to behave in this world? How do we want to put our vision and our mission to work? We have a set of values that are, well, it's a political and an action committee. That we are going to be aligned towards political solutions for funding and the support for libraries around the country. The action part, I mean, one day a year, we can get it's like every election day's opening night for a play, but the committee part as well. How do we do it together? And I'm sharing the mission, vision, and values more than the statistics on that earlier slide. If you're interested, go back to the recording, but I'm sharing the mission, vision, and values because that's the right story to be telling. The statistics do matter, and I'm going to get into that in a minute, but the right story, the only story that matters is the one that is, well, accepted by, not acceptable to necessarily, but accepted by your audience. We tend in libraries, well, we have some conventional wisdom in libraries about advocacy. We have some conventional wisdom about marketing, and I want to really put a pin in it and dispel it. I want to pop it. There's a number of things that we know to be true based on our work helping libraries in towns as big as New Orleans or Dallas or Miami and places, well, I mean, places as small as yours. The work that we're doing here on advocacy needs to be reconsidered because honestly, I gotta be honest with you, none of that stuff that's on that other slide, even though you've been told in other presentations or read different books or maybe seen some toolkits, is particularly true. Unfortunately, people do not respond to stories alone. Everybody has got a good story. What people respond to in terms of political engagement, in terms of being a donor, in terms of being a volunteer, like having a deep relationship that gets developed, what people respond to is not the fact that you've done something, everybody's got a great story, but how have you put a shared value system to work? How does your story help provide resonance for them to their own value system, their own vision, their own mission? This idea that our storytelling needs to be focused on our patrons and our customers, unfortunately, has proven to not be extremely helpful when we're talking about taxes. Because, well, one key element is that we tend to use the library patron or a customer, and I don't know what you call them, a user in your place, as a proxy. Like, oh, look, there was somebody who was helped, rather than I did this work, we did this work together. We tend to use the wrong nouns as well as the wrong pronouns. We use library as if it was a sentient being, or the library feels, the library thinks. Folks, we need to be able to move beyond that and embody. I mean, you have a responsibility as a board. The staff have responsibilities in their roles as well. There's actors in this space. And if we don't name them, well, let me get into why that's important in just a minute. There's also this idea in library advocacy that we should not be too data heavy, and I think we need to dispel that myth as well. There's a number of people in your community who are numbers people themselves, and I'm going to get into that in a minute as to why it's important, especially in a situation where there's confusion or concern or even scarcity, because numbers and data really do drive the story home for a certain kind of decision maker. It might be a big donor. It certainly is elected officials. And this idea that people have to become users of the library in order for them to become supporters. This idea that if you get them in, you win. If they only came to the library, they saw how wonderful it was. And yet this country is littered with libraries that are named after families that are too rich to use the place, and they still want to support it. Let me take you through just a little bit of the challenges that we're seeing around the country in order to root this rest of this conversation in both the challenges and the opportunities that you have. How high are we going to bounce? Are we going to bounce forward? The work that we do around the country in this COVID environment, and in New Orleans right now in a particular way, it's not just COVID. They're very much about still. I mean, Hurricane Ida is still a very present tense for them, unfortunately. But what we've learned as we've gone through campaigns since the start of COVID is that many of our traditional narratives about the stories that we want to tell about our library and the work that we do at the library are going to be very difficult because they've been disrupted in the process. There has to be, in this new context during COVID, even late stages, we're coming through it or out of it. I mean, it was different up in Wisconsin than it was in Illinois with masks for a long time. And yet there was still, I think responsibly, a shift in how services were being done. These features that we have traditionally looked at as being the virtue of libraries, yes, some of them will endure. And we have to be in a position to educate the public, inform our stakeholders, and orient the folks to what we're doing in this current environment. What Karol talked about, what Linda talked about, as being the responses that are thoughtful, engaged, proactive, measured, and they are the driver for what our next set of stories need to be. Oh, pardon me. The other bit of challenge here is that there are places where, despite different kinds of economic relief, there is a certain conservatism, and I don't mean that with a political spin. I mean that, like, are we interested in opening our wallets and taxing ourselves? That elected officials, so many elected officials, are waiting for the other shoe to fall. Or there's the one-time money excuse that we see. There are plenty of places that are looking at relief funds that have come in, stimulus money that's come in, capacity building support that's come in, and they're very hesitant to put it to work on something like a library-shaped solution to problems in the community. What we have to be able to do in that kind of a context is rewrite the budget alongside them. I'm going to give you some advice about how to do that. Okay, all of that as preamble, all of that with the idea that what's the story that matters? How do we begin to tell it? The story in Berwyn, Illinois, 60402, my hometown, is going to be substantially similar and radically different than each and every one of yours across both your counties and each one of your towns. The particulars of it and the peculiar parts of it, I need you to think about a little bit with the insights that I want to provide about what activates people not to become users. Of course, I'm interested in people being users, don't get me wrong, I think it's wonderful. And yet, it's the support matrix, the willingness to fund as a donor, as an elected official, if you're a voter, as a constituent of your elected officials, to be involved as a volunteer. Let me tell you a little bit of insights on how how people are wired to listen. There are fundamentally 4 ways that people are wired to listen to a conversation about libraries or truly any issue that matters. This could be if you're really into Greenpeace, if you think the Sierra Club is wonderful, if you believe that the NRA is on the right side of the Second Amendment. People are engaged for one of 4 primary reasons. As an individual, and I gotta be honest with you, I'm not engaged with the first one very much, even though a lot of people in libraries are. Compassionately engaged is how people listen to stories about libraries. The work that you do for people in moments of transition and crisis, kids who are in need, seniors who are isolated otherwise. The compassionate part of the core of library services is perhaps the easiest story for us to tell. And people are wired to listen to it, and it works, and that's why we've been doing it for a long time. And compassion is about populations of people or small groups. It's an axis of communication, but it's not the only one. I need to highlight and encourage an awareness that you might have about the other 3. One of the other ways that people are wired is pride of place. And pride of place is equally important to talk about in terms of the placemaking, the community building, the infrastructure. You might guess that I'm kind of wired more about pride of place. I love Berwyn, Illinois, my hometown. I want to see it be interesting. And the library brings interesting every day. I want to see it be thriving. And yes, all of the beautiful and wonderful things that the compassionate people care about lives in my head inside thriving. Health informatics, literacy services, the hand up instead of the hand out. And what also lives here to me is prosperity. The idea that being a prosperous community where people have the chance to get their first, best, or next job and tell me about what you did at the library to help support workforce development, or people have a chance to, I don't know, set up a second business and get on the internet and learn about the marketplace and have access to the global market through your technology. Folks, those 2 things are of equal importance, but they're very different filters for the audience. There's also another kind of audience member here, and these are not in sequence top to bottom as to which is better. I just went with what is more familiar perhaps, but this idea, and I mentioned this in the beginning, that data, it has to be a way for us to interact with our audiences, whether they're donors, elected officials, voters, constituents, volunteers, the people who care, who have a data influenced or a data filter approach. It's like my father-in-law, okay? Ed's great. Ed's a 16-inch softball umpire. He's in the Hall of Fame. He's also an accountant. Ed watches sports until 2 o'clock in the morning on ESPN 1, 2, and 3. And what Ed does is that he gets up in the next morning, goes by the Chicago Sun-Times at the gas station, and he opens up the paper to the box scores to make sure he didn't miss anything. All the data that's in there for a guy like Ed, I mean, he calls balls and strikes for fun. And what he does next is extremely important to talk about. What he does next is that he turns the page and then he reads about the team. He reads about the star player. Is that star player a streak or a slump? Reads about the management decisions, the back office. What are they doing? What's up next for them in the season? All of his stories about the team. And let me tell you, you folks are part of that team here. All the stories are intermediated first by well, what's the stats? In a library context, there's a whole bunch of people who need to hear from you about where the money has gone, what the expected and hoped for outcomes were, what the measurements are, because then they want to hear about compassion. They want to hear about pride of place. Then, in a normal year, not the second annual year, I wouldn't have concerned or fearful on a slide for your community. I will in New Orleans because they just had a hurricane here, but we've all got a COVID situation. And there is an audience of people who want to listen to you based not on being fearful or concerned, but that you understand like an adult that we're in the middle of something extraordinary. And they, during the moment of crisis, during this long-term chronic crisis, need to hear from you about what are the library-shaped solutions and the librarian-enacted solutions to problems. And if you're not being, well, quite frankly, frank with them about it, And if you try and gloss over things, they will tune you out because you perhaps are a bit of a Pollyanna. They're not looking to go negative, folks. They're looking to have a very honest conversation about what is our common cause, what is our common concern. All right, with that in mind, how people listen, why do people get involved in anything? And this is an important conversation to have. Why in politics? Why in parties? Why does somebody either donate to Greenpeace or the Sierra Club or become a card-carrying member of the NRA or the ACLU? There are certain characteristics in that political conversation that we need to be aware of if we're going to be crafting a story that matters to the people who listen. Not only those 4 ways that they're wired, but first and foremost, what activates people for the ideals in their lives is around shared values and shared identity. It's why in politics we have party. And it's why when you read the book and a candidate puts out the book, It Takes a Village, Dreams from My Father, Make America Great Again. If you like that book, you're going to hold it to your chest and you're going to share it. You're going to give it as a gift. You're going to say, you got to read this. This guy or gal's got to figure it out. And if you don't like it, you're going to throw it at the television because it offends you. Because what is in a campaign fundamentally is a place where, how do we see the candidate expressing our values? How do we see the identity come together, not in a pernicious political party way, but I mean, folks, if you get right down to it, in your towns, across your counties, in your service area, you are the vanguard of the library party. You are the people who have shown up to party, to build the party. And there is something very powerful in terms of people being able to say, I have a shared identity that puts me in proximity to, in alignment with that library party. Now, from the politics side of things, and this is all from a book called The Political Brain. It's by a guy named Drew Weston. It's fascinating if you like politics. If you don't, well, don't read it before bed, but I still recommend it. He says that these 2 are the key drivers. And if I had a very, very long slide, I would put a big gap between shared values and shared identity around library, the goals of library work, the goals of literacy and community service. The identity is people who care or are building community or fixing problems. Big gap then down to personal characteristics and specific policies. The personal characteristics thing is just a quick toss off. For every Donald Trump, I will raise you a Bill Clinton. We don't have that problem necessarily in libraries. But what we tend to focus on as library leaders is the thing that's furthest away from what activates people in a political environment or an ideals-based environment, and that's the policy particulars. Yes, it is your responsibility as the Board of Trustees with the fiduciary and a policy responsibility to have these policies in place, and yet the devil that is in the details is not what activates support. It's the trust that people have in you that you will be doing the job when they're not paying attention. But fundamentally, how are the policies, the procedures, the collection, the staffing, the hours, the approach to e-resources, the programming that you do in-house and the partnerships you bring in, how are those an expression of values and identities? All right. There's another access to this as you develop the story that you need to tell, the only story that really matters, which is being listened to by people with those 4 characteristics, with the understanding that it's really more about resonant values and saying that we're going to either fix problems or support people together. There are 4 different types of supporters for any cause. And I'm giving you a lot of political theory tonight because you deserve it. There are 4 types of supporters for any cause: Greenpeace, Sierra Club, NRA, ACLU, the local YMCA that's doing the stew or the soup night to raise funds. I mean, there are people who are relational supporters as an inner circle. They're relational supporters in a similar way about libraries. Well, they know the library. They know librarians. They've had a profound, not a book barista moment, but a profound experience of libraries. It might be akin to, say, a cancer survivor's family or friends who will do the walk for life. It's a small group, and they're a very important group to cultivate and support. They're an important group to build out by sharing more about, I mean, it's us tonight. It's us. Them is us, these relational supporters. There's another tier or ring, I should say, of other types of supporters who are no less valuable and no less useful to all of our work around building new relationships for the library, securing the funding that we need, bringing in volunteers, donors, building support amongst constituents of elected officials, talking to elected officials about what you really need. These are ideological supporters of the library. They are aligned with what you're doing and the work that's being done. They are somebody who is into literacy, but hadn't quite remembered that you folks are doing that. There's somebody who's into support for seniors, or they're looking at workforce or the local prosperity conversation, and they might not themselves be users. So they need the dots connected for them about how you and they are ideologically aligned about compassion or solutions or pride of place. They're capable of understanding. It takes some education and orientation. They're not going to come along quickly. And that's why this advocacy conversation is a long conversation. They might not ever matriculate into being a relational supporter. They don't have to. We can use them just like they are. I don't mean use them in a negative way, like we'll take them. There's another type of supporter, and this is how people are wired, again, to listen to your stories about your particular library. There's a kind of supporter who is called an aversionary supporter. They are folks who are, well, are we throwing good money after bad? Like, why are we doing it this way this time? I thought that we had this thing. What? I would like to avoid some bad outcomes in my hometown. I want to avoid bad outcomes for a population I love and I'm concerned about. Tell me what to do to fix a problem and I'll come out and do it. These are the kind of people who are more activists than advocacy partners. They're the folks who will tell you after something has gone wrong that, hey, if I'd only known, I would have helped. They're in it for good reasons about shared values and shared identity. They're in it for compassion and pride, and they have a data filter and they want to see solutions happen. They are a particular type of supporter that I would highly encourage you to also cultivate, because not only do they react to negative situations like save the library, our library budget's getting cut, something bad's going down, they also are very eager to help you seize opportunities. They're ready to work quick. They will be with you emotionally very deeply, but not for a long time. The ideological people, and certainly the relational people, I don't know how many board meetings you have to do every month. I had to do quite committee meetings and everything. I had to do quite a few when I was on the board. The last type of supporter, who is someone who's motivated to join a cause, be part of a solution, is the access supporters. And folks, I got to be honest with you, there's not a lot of access supporters in libraries. In politics, it's the people who want to spend $10,000 a plate to sit next to Mr. Trump or Mr. Obama or Mrs. Clinton, and we don't have a lot of those. You can throw a good party from time to time, but I want to share all of this with you because you deserve the political literacy skills here. But it's those first three that, as you're thinking through who in my community, how do I activate them, what offer do I make them to become part of the cause that is the library party, it lends itself to this. There are also two potential axes for how we talk to our community and with our community. And there are only two reasons, well, there's three reasons to give you money. One reason to give you money is because it's inertia. They've been giving you money, they're just going to keep giving you money. And in the absence of friction, that's fine. And also in the absence of new opportunities or ideas, really motivates people to fund a library, either as a taxpayer or as an elected official or as a donor, or to even give of their time, which is treasure, as a volunteer. There's one of two reasons. One is a story of your success that demonstrates your competencies as a library. You can scale up success that you've had. We had 50 kids in story time last month. We should do 75. Let's make it happen. Or 100 or 150. I don't know what your number is supposed to be. Or you have success that can be replicated. And the replication of your success is a key driver. That we are really good at story time. Now let's do it for people who are looking for work. The other thing, though, that takes a great deal of courage and it's not better or worse, it just needs to be true, is stories of failure that talk about your integrity. That you've identified something that's failing in the community, you have the integrity to do it as a library team if you are properly resourced. There's impending failure as well as present failure that can be talked about. That we know right now, with the unemployment rate being what it is, or we know right now that as the COVID relief money that starts to sunset, the ARPA money that came in, the ESSER money that came in, as that starts to wind down, the school kids are going to need. And we are looking down the calendar. We have the integrity and the competency to tell that story and to be in a position then to, well, nudge the comet or the asteroid before it hits. Really, there's only two reasons for those people who are either compassionately engaged or engaged through pride of place, who need that data filter or want to work on library shaped solutions with you. There's only two reasons that anybody who is values aligned or aligned with you around identity and party would give you the funding, relational supporters alike. All right, let's talk about carrying the message for just a moment. Donors, grant makers, philanthropy and such, they are aligned along in these ways as well as individuals are. The group dynamics are the same. Shared values, common mission, aligned vision. The candidate metaphor of how do values and identity get expressed in the campaign, we have to be able to empower us, each other, and our staffs to go out and well, understand that they and you together are really the only people who can tell the story. You are the only people who can tell the story because you are the only experts in librarianship. You are the only experts in library work. You are the only experts in library services in your places. And what happens if it doesn't, forgive me, what happens if you don't do the work? Boards, friends, colleagues, as a former board member myself, I didn't understand this necessarily as deeply then as I do now. That it takes a village, dreams from my father, make Berwyn, Illinois great again, is really how we should have titled our strategic plans, those two strategic plans that I helped run. That what was in that strategic plan that I had as a board member was a tremendous amount of details, and it needed to be responsibly, but we needed to bring in the values, the why of what we were doing, those details, the identity that was being expressed, and having a set of features. The best way for a board to carry the message is fundamentally one where we understand that the devil of details is, well, on one shoulder, but the angel of the virtues, if you will, the angel of the virtues of our shared value system needs to speak just as loudly. In a building plan, there's going to be a couple old guys who are going to fight about whether or not it should be copper or PVC piping, or if it's going to be carpeting or tile. And you have to figure that out too, because that's your gig if you're on the buildings and grounds committee. And yet most people want to know why we need a new, updated, clean, well-lighted place that's welcoming for all and allows for capacity building activity across different parts of our infrastructure. The expression of our values in these different plans and also in your budget. The budget, our current president is credited with a saying that says, "Show me your budget and I'll know your values. Show me your budget and I'll know your values." And that is absolutely correct. Without having the budget be an expression of that shared value framework and that shared identity, and if it's disconnected, folks, but to share your budget briefing book with your constituents, with your stakeholders, with your elected officials in a way that says, this is how we're realizing. We're either scaling it up, we're replicating it, or we're looking to avert problems. This is how we are realizing who we want to be. All right, team. I have had, forgive me, I have 2 more slides. I'm gonna take some questions in the chat. I'm gonna invite you to, whatever's on your mind, and also invite you to do something which might be kind of interesting or hope maybe even helpful, is to get in touch with me, afterwards as well. Like I said, we do all of this work for libraries for free, pro bono, in order to help think through the particulars and the peculiars. All right, as you're thinking about things to put in the chat, I got two more little pieces of advice for you. One is around positioning the library to tell better stories. We tend to do a lot of marketing in our libraries about what's happening tomorrow. Tomorrow, story time, 10 a.m., bring your kids. That is utilitarian, and it needs to be there because we want them to bring their kids. But tomorrow at 10 a.m., there's only a certain number of people who can benefit directly from that service, that program, that collection, that teaching moment, whatever it is. And there's a lot more people who want to hear how, last week at 10 a.m. on Tuesdays, we had a story time that was gangbusters. Miss Karen, who loves these kids, helped the parents be better parents as a partner in early language literacy, helped the kids, letter shapes and numbers, story time. Last week, we had 50, we should have 75 or 100 or 150. Here's how you can help us get to that. Or last week, let me tell you what we did with our youth services librarian. We really need an outreach services librarian now for adults. Marketing what happened yesterday is of paramount importance. And when I say marketing, I'm also trying to encourage you as the board to take some of your vital small budgets and allocate it so that your staff can amplify I did this work and we need these resources. Finally, the concept of telling the truth and of building support through truth telling, especially in this time that is still, well, maybe we're late stage. Maybe this, I hope it's only the second annual. I really do. What happens if you get the funding, and what happens if you don't? Identifying not just the failures in the community, but the role that you have to say, if we are properly resourced, if we are properly funded, what happens is our hopes, and we have the integrity to identify to you, and we have the experience to identify to you as a stakeholder, an elected official, a donor, even a volunteer, what happens if we're not properly resourced. All right, hopefully that was a good story, and that you're going to go out and be able to think it through for these budgets and your big asks. I want to be able to take a few minutes here. I'm going to stop my sharing here, Lori. I apologize for just dumping off like that. But I want to be able to pay attention to the chat, see what people have on their minds and their hearts. And again, to make that offer that says, if you got something particular and peculiar that you want to think through out loud with me, I'd love to be able to do that. That's the kind of work we do every day. I mean, I got on an airplane and I went to New Orleans. I'd love to drive up, through well, your neck of the woods. So, team, anything in the chat? Lori, Carol?
Nothing yet.
What are your thoughts? Carol, as the director for the system, I'd love to hear what you think.
Well, there we go. Look, I can't get back on here. No, super interesting. And I guess a little bit of maybe to spark some interest in some of our other libraries. What types of libraries and communities are you working with? I mean, are these big projects, or are you looking at some very small libraries and smaller communities that need your help?
Sure. So in New Orleans, it's a significant part of their budget. They're on the ballot for over 50% of their budget on December 11th election. The size of it is, it's a couple $1 million because that's what it is in a city as big as New Orleans. And yet, the proportion of it at over 50% is really why we're here. We've worked on campaigns. Our smallest one was in Potomac, Illinois. Potomac, Illinois is north of Danville. It was 646 people who live in Potomac, Illinois. And what they were going to do is create a small Illinois library district. There's a lot of them. And it was going to now be 1,200 families in the school district. And they were asking for $37,800 from the voters. And that is just as important. I mean, it's not the widow's mite. It is just as important. So what I'm talking about here is a universal sort of American condition for how people think about taxes. We throw the shoe at the TV all the time when we start talking about taxes. And yet we're like, why don't we take care of each other? Why don't we focus on what's really important?
Yeah. There are a few questions in the chat here, Lori. I don't know if you want to.
No, I can grab it right here.
You
Laura,
can
don't
grab
worry.
those. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Kristen, thank you for asking. How do we start to create a strategic plan? Most important question. The most important questions we need to answer. That is a great point, or great question. I always start with what are my, and when I say, I'm sorry, our, let me say our. As a board, as a staff group, what are my value system? What do I believe in personally? Where does this board service or this job I'm doing intersect with my own personal value system? And surfacing that value system is extremely important because I know that a lot of it is clouded sometimes in conversations by political perspectives, and yet the value system of a progressive, a conservative, and a libertarian are substantially similar when it comes to how we treat other people. So having that conversation around what are our personal values, because as a board, you have the policy responsibility and the fiduciary responsibilities. So unless you're in touch with that yourself, and then the next key step is to listen to the community in different ways. It could be a survey, it could be a door-to-door situation, it could be focus groups, but what are their values? What do they believe? And then to reverse engineer from that, what's the form of the library or the functions that we want to perform? There's no perfect way to do a strategic plan, and yet it has to be based on how do we want to express who we want to be in our budget and our buildings. Peggy is asking, our municipal board met on Monday night. They want to know why we need even more money this year than last year. God bless you. We got a lot of money last year to do an expansion. Why do we need even more money when we're not expanding? I would very much, Peggy, invite you to contact me directly about that one, because each of those different types of supporters, the new money extends success, new money fixes failure, those are decisions that we need to make together based on your current situation. If you were to take all of those different permutations, 4 kinds of supporters, 4 ways that people listen, 2 reasons to support, the 2 key values, system and identity, there's something like a Cartesian product, like 186 different messages, but we got to find the right one for you. And I can help you move through that exercise. Kay is asking or saying, do you work with school libraries in conjunction with public libraries? Kay, thank you. We have a very, public library focus on tonight's conversation. We run a really strong portfolio in support of school libraries. In fact, a couple of years ago, when there was a constitutional amendment in Wisconsin to abolish the office of state treasurer, if I remember correctly, who was responsible for the school fund, which goes to school libraries. We in fact help support some conversations about retaining that constitutional officer because of that reason. We work in places like Washington, D.C., where we spent 2 years supporting school librarians and have just gotten the city council there in Washington, D.C. to approve funding to hire a school librarian in every single school. So we do a lot of Save the School Librarian campaigns, unfortunately. That's a condition of how we fund education, and our school librarians are positioned right now. We actually run a digital campaign called SaveSchoolLibrarians.org. It's every library, partially because the institution on the corner, partially because if I'd started it out 8-9 years ago saying every librarian, everybody would freaked out. But it really is about Save School Librarians, because if you eliminate that position, you eliminate an entire department. Okay, I'd love to talk more about what happened. Janie, I'm sorry. We are looking to renew our library friends mainly as a tool to help us raise funds for a much needed and oft delayed reimagining of our library services and the building. It will be housed in a very little local newspaper coverage of anything, but a community website available for free sharing. Suggestions on how to recruit friends. Most of us would rather read than solicit supporters. Doug in Whitewater. Doug, I get it. There is a, so if you are soliciting friends to do book sales and bake sales, you will get people who enjoy doing book sales and bake sales. There's nothing wrong with that. If you're soliciting friends to do black tie galas, you will get black tie gala type friends. If you are soliciting friends to do political activity and engagement with elected officials or larger donors, you will get, so I'm not saying, we need to look at not your recruiting practice, but the 1 year, 3 year, and 5 year mission of the library to see if you're making asks that are relevant to the right kind of people. If you have enough capacity and enough infrastructure to have different domains within your friends group, that's fantastic. But really, how does their fundraising activity, their volunteerism, the work that they're doing to cultivate more relational supporters, because they're in that relational pool, how does it align with the strategic priorities of the library? It sometimes is hard conversations. And yet, they're important ones, because I don't know anyone who's in a relational perspective, short of some people with Don Quixote complexes, who don't want to see, the good of the order. Real quick, Lori, Carol, I know we're at the top of the hour here. I got one more question in the chat. Can I take it?
Of course.
Okay, cool. Robert asks or says, how do you deal with divided communities? Communities are rarely homogenous in their attitudes. Do you say they have common values underneath? I would ask about a divided community as being, there's a few different ways to approach it before I would start answering how to help solve it. Community on the way up, I don't know where you're from, Robert, and that's okay. A community on the way up or the way down. And I'm not going to ask you to put it in the chat, don't. Community on the way up, there is sometimes a problem between old folks who have been in town and new folks who have been in town, so that's a divide. Community that's having trouble, let me not say on the way down, there's sometimes a scarcity of resources that pits people against each other. That's a whole matrix of trouble that happens in communities. Another matrix of trouble, though, is political philosophy, and fine free is a great example. A lot of libraries around the country are going fine free because it's virtuous. And yet, you look at the budget, I mean, in Berwyn, my hometown, we went fine free only after I was able to figure out, along with my board colleagues, where we were going to find $74,800 to replace the fines and fees. Because until we could do that, there was no way the old Bohemians in my community, Chrastka is a Bohemian name, it's a Czech last name, the old Bohemians in my community were going to let us do it, because it would have meant losing 2 youth services librarians. So there's a fiscal conversation that's a political one in that case. But there's a value system that says, well, fines are a barrier. In a progressive side of things, fines in a libertarian perspective are fundamentally like, that's government overreach. We've already gotten taxed once for it. I don't like taxes to begin with. Why are we doing it twice? And then in a conservative environment, fine free is like, okay, we're going to have anarchy then. No, we're not, because what we're going to do is make sure that if the book is never returned, we will charge you back for it. And so between the two kinds of conflict around identity or around politics, I mean, I'm sure that there's more than that. So this again is another kind of call, but I think we've got a pathway. It's based then on, okay, who are we? What is our value system? To have an active kind of listening going on about that, and for the library to lead on it, perhaps in a community that hasn't talked about what their own identity is in a long time. The beautiful thing about a library in a community is that you're not single purpose. It's also the most difficult part of being a library, I'll give you that, because you got to address a lot of different needs. But because you're not single purpose, you can approach it and say, we've got people who use it from all walks of life. We serve all sorts of people. We have a mission that's diverse. We're in perhaps a unique position to convene, not just a strategic plan for our library, but maybe a strategic plan for our town. Maybe a strategic plan for who we want to be.
Thank you, John. We really appreciated you coming to us virtually and presenting, give us some information of things to think about, telling the story that matters to people, understanding characteristics of supporters, and so much more. So thank you for coming here. And thanks to all our presenters, and thanks to all our library trustees, library directors, and others who attended this evening. We hope you had an enjoyable evening. As a reminder, you will receive an email when the recording of tonight's event is available for viewing. So be sure to look for that. We look forward to seeing you next year, and have a good night. So bye.